So I got to do something interesting last night. So at the school I go to at University of Texas at Dallas, UTD, they had the world early premiere of the new remake. I think it's a remake. I'll double check that right now. Is it a remake? Hold on. I'm actually curious. Okay, so there is another Triumph of the Heart, but it was made in the 90s and it's not actually about it at all. It's another movie that just happens to be called Triumph of the Heart. It's not the same subject matter whatsoever. So it's not a remake. This is an ode. This is an original movie. Got this here wristband that says Triumph of the Heart all over it. But yeah, they had this early world premiere here at UTD. They had like the Polish ambassador. They had the director, all the actors, like the people, the investors, the people who funded the movie and whatnot. Like it was a black tie event, so you had to come super dressed up, strict dress code. The place was packed to the brim, so I think it was pretty much sold out. I mean, it basically sold out. I'm just going to call it sold out. And my God, was this movie terrible. I really, really did not like this movie. And to be completely honest with you, I wouldn't call this a piece of regular cinema, okay? I don't think that this movie, is interesting. This movie is not about telling the story of the movie, if that makes sense, right? This movie, like a traditional piece of cinema would. This movie is a vehicle for its religious messaging, right? I'm going to use this word pretty loosely, so some of y'all might not like my use of this word, but it's whatever. You can interchange a different word for it if you don't like the use of this word. This movie is much more religious propaganda than it is like traditional cinema where you're telling a story, you know? Yes, the story is being told, but it becomes very clear, especially in the second half of the movie, that the real main goal of this movie is the religious messaging. And I'm going to be honest with you, okay? When your movie opens up, so they're showing like a couple of these premiere type reels immediately before they start the movie, and it shows like, you know, a quote by some famous person saying, "Oh, this movie was great, 5 out of 5 stars," right? The second or third quote, like person that they showed a quote by was Matt Walsh, okay? Before the movie starts. Now, you can have right-wing views, okay? I'm not asserting that it's not possible for somebody to be a good director and have right-wing views, okay? But Matt Walsh is a lunatic, okay? And I'm going to make the assertion that no self-respecting director puts a Matt Walsh quote at the beginning of their movie. That's just not a thing that happens, okay? And so you're not starting the movie off great when you start off with a Matt Walsh quote. Now, I had no idea what I was getting into with this movie, all right? My professor, we were supposed to watch this and go to the premiere for this Holocaust history class that I'm in. I'm in an upper level, 4,000 level Holocaust history class. And this was supposed to be about how not just Jews suffered and how, you know, other races and ethnicities and whatnot and religions and other people suffered in the Holocaust, and other people like, you know, martyred themselves and did the right thing, you know, to help Jews out and help other people out. And the movie is about this priest, this Catholic priest, who during the German invasion of Poland kind of gets rounded up with a whole bunch of the other influential people when they're trying to sort of stamp out Polish culture. When they were in the process of not only trying to squash Poland militarily, but kind of squash them from the inside out, they rounded up influential people, including Catholic priests, who you would think ostensibly the Nazis would not want to go after necessarily because of the bad PR and their association with Christendom and Christianity and Catholicism and whatnot. But yeah, this Catholic priest gets rounded up, and basically through the circumstances don't really matter too much. Basically, he martyrs himself. There's a guy who's about to be killed or be condemned to starve to death in front of him, and he says, "No, I'll take his place instead." And so he is, along with his, he's part of a group of 10 guys who just gets thrown into this small room dungeon type thing and is expected to just starve to death over the next 1 or 2 weeks or whatever. But man, they really don't mess around. The entire movie is spent in this tiny room jail cell dungeon thing that they've locked these 10 guys in, right? This movie kind of lacks a beginning and a middle, right? It's kind of just all end. They very, very, they don't mess around, right? They don't establish the characters really at all whatsoever. They pretty much just almost immediately cut to the scene that the specific scenario in which these 10 guys were being chosen to be an example of the group and starve to death or whatever. They don't spend any time building up any of the characters or really doing anything. They pretty much just create the scenario in which they're going to condemn these 10 guys and then condemn them and chuck them in the jail cell. And from like 10 or 15 minutes into the movie, I mean, I didn't have a stopwatch on me, but from very, very early on in the movie, these guys are chucked in the jail cell and they're there the whole time. Okay, you spend almost the entire movie with these 10 dudes. They're slowly dwindling in numbers. They die one by one in this small dungeony jail cell thing. And who would have freaking guessed a movie about 10 guys starving to death in a small room would be boring, okay? Now, I'm not saying you got to have action or like you can't have a bespoke movie that's more dialogue heavy and about like the symbolism and the philosophy and the conversations they have. You don't have to have, like, that is totally doable. There are plenty of movies out there that do that. But none of the conversations they have are interesting whatsoever, right? They almost talk about nothing for most of the time. They spend a good chunk of the time talking about vaguely religious things. They give you no reason to care about these characters, right? You need to build up these characters before you throw them in the jail cell, or at least a little bit, right? Because as is, you just get these 10 random dudes in a jail cell, and like beyond the basic humanity of caring about a human being and being like, oh man, that sucks that they're condemned to starve to death in this little cell or whatever. You don't care about them, okay? And so it's only after they have been thrown in this dungeon that they try and establish these characters and make you care about them, okay? And they do this through a series of flashbacks, right? Each of the couple of main characters will have their own series of flashbacks to previous times in their life when, you know, things were better and not war-torn and they weren't condemned to starve to death in this little dungeon or whatever. And some of those flashback scenes are okay, right? Some of them are kind of weird and heavy-handed and not very good. But a few of them are okay, especially with Albert. Okay, I thought the flashback scenes with him had some potential. That if they restructured the whole movie, they really stripped it down and took those building blocks, right? Specifically like the scenes with Albert and his girlfriend from the past or whatever. And maybe they fleshed them out a bit and put him at the beginning of the movie before they threw him in the dungeon. Maybe you'd care about Albert a bit more. But like you just don't care about him that much. And like, yes, the movie is sort of like set up to be a tearjerker. And if you spend 2 hours intimately watching a group of 10 guys, all right, even if you didn't care about them at the beginning, and then you kill them slowly one by one at the end in horrific ways, and then you have swelling whooshy music and just because it is able to evoke a tiny fraction of emotion at the very end by just virtue of us being human beings, right? I don't think really speaks to the movie's ability to like tell an emotionally good story, right? I still did not really care very much about these characters by the end, right? A handful of disconnected, out of context flashbacks to points in their past that were nicer than them starving to death in a dungeon is not really like enough to build up these characters as somebody I deeply care about. But yeah, this movie was just so boring. Like none of the conversations they had were particularly memorable or interesting. This movie was clearly like all about trying to evoke the Christian feels, right? It was all about trying to get you into your mega church Christian feels. And like at the premiere, there were tons of pastors all in their, in their black, and then their get up with the black collar and the little white patch in the middle. And there was a whole bunch of nuns in the whole white get up and whatnot. This movie was made to get you in your Christian feels, right? This movie was basically, I don't think the Matt Walsh quote at the beginning was just because like the director really likes Matt Walsh and respects his opinion or something, right? I think that was a very deliberate choice as like a not very subtle signal to the people in the audience, like, hey, we think a lot of you might like Matt Walsh and he likes this movie. So, you're priming them you're literally priming them to like the movie based on like, referencing this other, super religious whack job that they like. But yeah, this movie was almost like, I feel like this movie was made for the Matt Walsh viewer, the unironic, actual, genuine Matt Walsh fan. This is who this movie was made for. But yeah, this movie is less so a traditional piece of cinema and more so a vehicle for pro-Catholic Christian religious messaging. It's made to get you into your Christian feels. But even at that, I don't think it does a very good job. Like, if that was your explicit purpose and goal at the making of this movie, I don't think they could have done, even like, that's obviously a silly goal, and that's probably not the type of movie I would like. But analyzing it from that lens, they still didn't do a very good job, I think. Right? The movie felt kind of Mel Gibson-y, but not in a good way and in a boring way. It was like if Mel Gibson tried to be tame. The movie was kind of sterile, right? And I'm not saying that you need to have like gore and blood and guts and you don't have to have that for it to be emotionally impactful. But when you over sterilize it, and you never show really anything aside from like a little bit of blood on the ground, or everything is implied off screen, right? You never see somebody really getting brutalized or anything like that. It's a little bit harder to like. It takes away a little bit of the emotional weight. And I'm going to say this is a nuanced point. Obviously, like I said, you don't have to have blood and guts or something and gore for it to be emotionally impactful, but it can, done properly, help amplify things, and the over sterilization that I felt like they did here kind of cut against it a little bit. Oh my God, the ending is absolutely hilarious. All right, I'm gonna be totally honest with you. So they started off with 10, and over 5 days, one or two of them are killed, and a few of them starved to death or whatever at that point. So there's only 4 or 5 of them left by like the last 20 or 30 minutes in the movie, and it just gets kind of silly. All right, I feel like they drop any pretense of this being a regular piece of cinema, or a movie for the regular cinema goer, for the regular person. And just fully drops the mask and just like, all right, we're gonna lean in as hard as we can into the religious, getting you in your religious feels and the religious iconography. This is religious propaganda. This is weird Christian Catholic propaganda. At the end, where they're like, they're supposed to be really cold, so they're all huddled together in the middle of on the floor of this dungeon or whatever, and like everything's all whooshy and with the music, and you've got this snake. This is where I almost lost it. Okay, I'm in this theater of all these like Catholic and Christian religious people, right? And they're all on varying levels of tearing up, and I'm just here cracking a smile, trying so hard not to laugh my ass off, because these 4 or 5 guys are just in a pile in the middle, and they're all whooshy with the camera and the lens flare, and they have this big anaconda snake just start crawling across them like it's like a black female rapper's music video or something, right? It was just like it was beyond try hardy, right? It was hilarious. It was campy. It was cringy. It was campy. It was like, it just was so out of place. And it was just like, oh my God, I'm sure there's some like religious symbolism here with the snake is supposed to represent Adam and Eve in the garden or some nonsense like that I'm not following or I'm not privy to. But from the regular ass person's perspective, it was just hilarious. Okay, it's supposed to be the most emotionally, like the emotional peak of the movie. These people, like the main character, the priest, and some of the other most important characters throughout the film, who you've come to care about the most, are at the end of starving to death. And you're gonna have like, it's like they're not taking it seriously. It's like they aren't taking it. It's genuinely hilarious. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, right? And then as they're doing that, they'll cut to scenes of like Jesus sitting there on the little pedestal seat thing next to the pastor guy with the crown of the crown of thorns and the little blood dripping down, and then they show a child version of the pastor from earlier in his life. He's being presented by like this like angelic figure, like a thorn of crowns or a thorn of flowers, and then it shows him with the thorns on later with the blood coming down. Like, it's so hardcore. Like, it was amazing how like the first quarter half of the movie, like, it felt religious, especially with like in the early premiere that I went to, they had this sort of presentation. They had the director come up and speak for a bit. They had a couple of the actors come up and speak for a bit. And they had this other guy, I don't remember who it was, come up and speak for a bit. And it was made fairly clear that this was a bit more religious leaning film. But I still thought it was a regular film, you know, until the Matt Walsh quote, really. But like if I ignored the Matt Walsh quote, it felt like a regular film somewhat, a poorly done one, but somewhat until about a quarter halfway through the film. And then it, you know, then it kind of exponentially ramps up into how overtly religious it becomes. There's a couple of like funny moments in this movie, but they aren't intending to be funny. All right. There's like one moment in somewhat early on when like one of the older guys in the group is supposed to be closer to starving to death. And he's like, everybody's arguing about something. And he's just like, oh, can everybody please quiet down? This might be my last sleep of my life. And I want to be able to, you know, I want some peace and quiet or something. And then everybody shuts up for a second. And then the fucking priest just starts singing some religious hymn, some song from church, and it's just like, bro, homeboy just told you to shut up, and you are the one who out of nowhere 3 seconds later starts, oh, bro, shut up. He just asked you to shut up. He's about to die. He's like 60 years old. Let him die. Like, shut up, bro. He doesn't want to listen to your church choir nonsense right now. He made that clear. I remember there being this super weird moment where like, I can't remember the exact context. I wish I could go back and pull up the movie and watch this section again so I could be exact. But it was something along the lines of... But it was something about them discussing resisting the Germans and it being futile and they're already condemned or something. And then the priest guy is like, we're all soldiers of God. But like the way that he says it is like to the audience. It's not to like the people in the dungeon with him, right? It's weirdly like said to the audience, right? There's a whole bunch of weird moments in this movie like that are just like, I guess you could use the word dog whistle. I mean, dog whistle sort of implies that like there's some nefarious bad thing that you're trying to signal towards. And maybe, you know, what they're signaling towards could be argued is not necessarily bad or whatever. So take away the negative connotation of the word dog whistle. But yeah, there's a bunch of weird moments throughout this movie where they like dog whistle to just strange things like the "we are all soldiers of God" thing. So something else I'll also note, I was not a fan of the couple of really cheap laughs that the movie tries to go for. Like at one point they managed to capture a rat to like eat as a group, and the pastor makes him say communion for the rat, and he's like, I don't care if it's foie gras or a sewer rat or whatever, we're saying grace, and like everybody in the theater laughs. And like, yes, in isolation this is a slightly funny joke, I guess, but like I feel like it's kind of disrespectful to the subject matter and really takes away from some of the emotional weight, right? You can't expect us to like full-throated bawl our eyes out at these characters you're expecting us to care about at the end of the movie when they starve to death. At the same time, you're going to make these like super cheap laugh joke moments. Like, I feel like it just really undermines the emotional weight that they try and give it towards the end of the movie, right? It just feels very childish. It just feels, it feels very emotionally unintelligent. Yeah, I don't know. It just felt borderline disrespectful to the subject matter, and it really took away from its ability to be emotionally impactful by the end of the movie. And again, I'll add the nuance. That's not saying you can't have any laughs ever or any slightly comedic moment ever in the movie, okay? But when you do it this childishly, this cheaply and whatnot, it's just, I don't know, it rings hollow and it really takes away from the other deeper, emotionally impactful moments like them starving to death. But yeah, I was not a particular fan of this movie, especially as someone going into it thinking it's a regular piece of cinema, right? If you go into this thinking it's a regular piece of cinema, you're going to be disappointed and find it weird, okay? I'm going to try and say this without being like mean, but this is for the 60 IQ mega church goer, right? This is for the type of person who goes to a mega church and genuinely likes Mel Gibson movies for their religious element or whatever. Like, But honestly, it made it so much better because I didn't know what I was getting into, right? So it made it a freaking roller coaster, right? I was expecting a regular movie. Maybe it would be somewhat poorly done because, you know, most movies aren't great, you know, so you got to expect it to be average or mediocre or whatever. But like, I had no idea that like first 5 seconds, they're going to show me a Matt Walsh quote going, "This movie's great for your faith," or something. And I'm me going, "Oh my God, what did I get into?" And yeah, I guess that was a Triumph of the Heart. Oh boy. Peace out, y'all.